and everybody involved, and I'm watching it, so you get to see kind of what's going on. They can also tell me to wake up and things like that on the site. But I see where Jessica is saying that apparently Region 1 had the same problem today, video but no sound. So it's all part of the learning.
So at this stage, we might need to just invite everybody to the Zoom meeting.
Not quite yet, Patrick. I think we only have two settings and they appear to be set correctly, but we're retesting.
Karen, do you want to go ahead and invite Bob into the Zoom meeting? He seems to be, Bob Gore seems to be the one most concerned.
I'll send him the information.
Not just yet. Not just yet.
Okay.
On the 22nd of May, person to person, I'm willing to bet that it's going to be a meeting like this. And there was talk about the homeless issue. That's an ongoing issue that I think that we're going to have to talk about in some detail at WQCC this fall. So with that, unless there's any more board member communications from any other board member, we'll move on to agenda item 3. I'd like to call upon. Yes.
Dr. Longley, just real quick, that was an oversight on my part. I did participate in that TV conversation. I don't remember the date, but I was on the call with you and Patrick. So that was the only item I realized that I had done.
Good. Thank you, Denise. At this point, I'd like to call upon State Board Member Tam Dudek to give an update to the board.
Well, thank you, Dr. Longley. Good afternoon. Great to see everybody, to see you healthy and safe and continuing to do the work that is so necessary, especially during this time, to ensure that there is water is safe and that to people out there have a lot of worries on their mind, and this is something that we can do to make sure that they continue to enjoy when they can good quality water for recreation as well as other beneficial uses. We continue to do so, and I really appreciate all the work that you and your staff are continuing to do. Just a quick update for me looking forward for the State Water Board meeting next week. We have a couple items that you might be interested in. One is consideration of the 303D list, and that will include recommendations approved by your board as well as the Lahontan Colorado River San Francisco Bay and LA Board in terms of listing of impaired water bodies. Thanks to all your staff for working on that and for getting that to the board for consideration. Also, next Tuesday, we will be considering for adoption regulations on water use reporting. As you'll remember, during the drought, we had extensive water conservation efforts as well as reporting requirements that since then have become voluntary. But on Tuesday, the State Water Board will consider regulations that would require all water systems that serve more than 3,000 customers or provide more than 3,000 acre feet a year to do monthly reporting to us of their water use. And if we do approve that, it will be effective starting July 1st. I also wanted to let you know about two workshops, which now have become, well, obviously webinars or web-based events, but one is happening tomorrow. It's the identification of at-risk water supplies. And if you remember, as part of the Safe and Affordable Funding for Equity and Resilience Drinking Water Program, one of the things that we have to do is identify water systems and domestic wells that are at risk of failing to provide adequate supply of safe drinking water. And so tomorrow there'll be a webinar to receive input. It's going to be led by staff, but I expect it to be very interesting, and I certainly will be tuning into that. And then towards the end of the month, on April 27th, another issue that you might be interested in is a workshop on Chrome 6. If you remember, a while back, the OEHA adopted a public health goal for hexavalent chromium, and then the Department of Public Health developed an MCL for Chrome 6, but that was invalidated by the court, and the State Water Board was directed to establish new standards, taking into account consideration of economic feasibility. This is an area that's always been of tremendous interest to me. The Division of Drinking Water staff put out a white paper discussing an economic feasibility analysis for considering Chrome 6 in MCL. And so that's what will be the topic on April 27th. They'll be presenting it. They'll be answering any questions. And the comment period, I think, is on May 15th. So that's it for me. Again, thank you all for the work that you do, especially during these challenging times. And please continue to stay safe and stay healthy.
Thank you, Tam. Yes, I have the same concern that you do regarding not only Chrome 6, but some of the other contaminants in these small communities. Just as a point, the process that they put in at Delano, and it's a packed bed process for removing nitrate, also works on chrome with minor modification. And I think we need to find ways to get these kinds of treatment processes, which tend to be efficient, not only from removing the materials, but more cost efficient into the smaller communities. But that's going to take some interesting planning. And I understand, Darren told me that there is a bill apparently being considered now that provides the state board, I believe the state board, the tools for pulling some of these communities together into a single entity insofar as providing water. It apparently comes out of the Eastern Municipal plant area or service area in Southern California. I presume that the legislator there is carrying it. So something to follow up on. It's a big issue.
Well, thank you.
So we'll move on now to agenda item 4, the public forum. As a reminder, if you intend to present or comment on any of the items in this hearing or think you might be interested in commenting, you should already be in the Zoom meeting room using the meeting ID provided on the board's website and the password you received from our staff. As I've stated before, if you've not already received a password, you can email us now at agenda5, that's one word, agenda5, with a letter, with the number 5, at waterboards.ca.gov. Include speaker comment in the subject line so that we can follow up with you. For those in the Zoom meeting, you will be on mute and your camera turned off until it is your turn to speak. Our meeting host, Gene Coughlin from our IT team, will then unmute you and ask you to turn on your camera if you have one. When you are done speaking and the board members have completed asking questions, you will be placed on mute and your camera turned off. Corinne, has anyone submitted an email requesting to speak on any topic which is not on the agenda today?
For the Zoom, but they did not indicate that they were going to. I think they were having problem with the webcast.
Yep, okay.
I don't think we are. I believe we have a Brian Pellins that joined. That might be a public comment.
Okay, we'll wait while that's checked out.
I believe that's staff, and they were having difficulty with the webcam. So they are joining the Zoom, but I do not believe we have any public comment cards.
Okay, we'll move on then to agenda item 5. I can always come back and ask later if there's somebody on who wants to comment. Executive Officer Patrick Palupa will answer questions regarding the Executive Officer's report, and we'll discuss the board's response to the COVID-19 epidemic or pandemic. Patrick?
Well, thank you so much, Dr. Longley. It has been quite an unusual time here at the Central Valley Water Board, and I think I just want to say a few words, giving thanks to the staff who've really kept the mission going in this tough times, and letting the board know a little bit about what's been happening behind the scenes with respect to our response to COVID-19. So very quickly, once the scope of this pandemic was recognized, so early March, the Central Valley Water Board, in particular, the leadership group and the program managers, started figuring out how we would triage the workload and get as many of our staffers working remotely as possible. We worked with State Water Board. State Water Board is home to the Division of Administrative Services. They are essentially our HR unit, who came up with what is basically an emergency telework agreement that we were able to get out to just about every staffer at all 3 offices. So we went in really, really short succession from having about 270 staff in 3 offices regularly showing up, some of whom teleworked maybe 1 or 2 days per week, to almost entirely teleworking 5 days a week, all but a skeleton crew of maybe 5 to 10 staffers per office, just the representatives from the executive group, representatives from enforcement, a couple admin staff who rotated through so that they didn't have to spend 5 days a week in the office. And it was truly an extraordinary effort. I mean, we went from minimal teleworking to 90 to 95% teleworking, and that's where we are right now. What I transmitted to board leadership, to be quite frank, was the performance metric that I was most interested in the beginning of March was not anything having to do with permit renewals, not anything having to do with inspections, but how many cars were in the parking lot and how quick we could get that parking lot empty and still be productive. All of the board's leadership, from the managers to the supervisors to the AEOs, really, really stepped it up to make sure that they worked with their staff, were flexible with schedules, because we have a heck of a lot of staff who are impacted not just because their workplace is closed, but also because their child's daycare is closed, because or other loved ones that they care for are also in dire circumstances. Um, so that's kind of what we did on the IT and admin end, and I can't thank the IT staff enough. Really, they worked to get laptops dusted off, even old ones, to make sure that they were in the hands of all the staff that needed them. That the staff who are working at home had what's called a virtual desktop that they could plug into. It works a little bit like a virtual network, so that they could access things that were previously only accessible on state computers. So that was put together in unbelievably short order, even with all the security issues that they had to work through and all the safeguards that come with deploying a major piece of software and quite a bit of hardware as well. So um, that on that end, it was truly a fantastic response. I also want to give credit to the admin staff. All that paperwork had to be processed, and it had to be processed in very short order. The telework agreements, figuring out how to do our timesheets differently, figuring out how to account for the time that folks were spending on COVID-related responses. Truly a huge effort going on behind the scenes to make sure that we could have staff deployed at home, still doing the work that they need to do. And so that's kind of what we did on the back end. Um, from the public side, I think we worked very hard to make sure that we could get this meeting up and running. We really wanted to make sure that the permits that we had in the hopper would be able to be acted upon by the board. The only thing that we put off for a couple months was some enforcement actions, because we wanted to make sure that we had the IT resources and IT protocols in place to make sure that we securely gave everybody their due process rights when there would be things like cross-examination and other procedural safeguards that were in place. So a couple of the matters that were currently scheduled for this April will likely be heard in June. And again, just to be completely candid, I fully expect that, as other board members have said, the genie is out of the bottle. Some of these features and some of these things that we're relying upon, the new tools, will be employed for quite some time. The virus will be out there in the summer, and while we may not all be working from home, I think we have experienced quite a ground shift in how we will conduct our business moving forward. One of the areas in which we're also continuing to do the work of the board, and I will say that our work is essential work. Protecting water quality is very important. Is in terms of enforcement, we have been continuing to do enforcement investigations where they're necessary to protect beneficial uses. Now, this means that many of the routine, the COVID-19 and social distancing means that many of the routine inspections that we do, like the permitting inspections, those can be held off if we can't do them with social distancing. But if we've got exigent water quality issues, if we've got what are called Class A violations as defined in the Water Board's enforcement policy, our inspectors are finding ways of getting out there and making sure that water quality is protected, even in these tough times. And I think that, that I will say that on the discharger side of things, we have seen a tremendous effort to still maintain compliance with board requirements, even through all this. We're innovating on our end, and we're also seeing the dischargers innovate on their ends. So again, really positive responses all up and down the line with respect to how we are dealing with this crisis. I will also add, in the mix, we are continuing to look at our workforce and continuing to try and strategize about worst case scenarios, not just if the COVID-19 stay in place orders last some amount of time, certainly beyond June, but if the state budget is also impacted by the impending recession that's about to hit us. I know that the governor's office has been pretty candid about transmitting to folks that the record surplus may not be there in years to come. So we're trying to make all the moves we can on our end to make sure that we have the workforce necessary to preserve our mission, even in very difficult times. there are certainly echoes, I know, from personal experience of the 2008-2009 financial crisis and the state's response there. We're trying to take all those lessons and learn from them and apply them as we face very uncertain times in the future. Thankfully, we are all in this together. I will say the level of coordination that we've had with State Board and the level of coordination I have had with the other executive officers, with the enforcement program leads, has truly been extraordinary. I know there's, every once in a while I may grumble for the amount of meetings that are popping up on my calendar to deal with the COVID-19 crisis, but just want to let you know that at a leadership level, at a staff level, at a program management level, the lines of communications have absolutely been open, and we're trying to make sure that we are responding to this crisis not just as an individual agency, but as a united state agency, with talking with the other BDOs, talking with Cal EPA, talking with other regional boards and the state board. So, I just want to kind of peel back the curtain a little bit for the board members and let them know what's been going on. I'll also say that there's a lot of new resources that are also coming online outside of the tech resources. New laws have been passed that allow certain staff who may be impacted more directly by COVID-19, whether they are experiencing symptoms and waiting a diagnostic test, or whether their kids are home and they have to fulfill the function of both staffer and teacher and parent all at once. There are new laws that allow certain new time off, and we're working with leadership to make sure that staff know that they can avail themselves of those laws. There's no harm, no shame in saying, you know what, I got to take care of my kids. There's a law that allows me to do that, and I'm gonna do that for the next few weeks, up to 12 weeks. So it's truly extraordinary the times that we're in. I'm reminded of the kind of parable, of give credit to the flexible, for they shall not break. That's kind of what the mode that we're in right now. Maximum flexibility is required for the situation that we're in. And thankfully, all of our leadership group have really taken that to heart. Last note, and again on our COVID-19 response, is that, and I communicated this to you and to a number of the other board members as well, the CV salts deadlines were pushed back 60 days under my action not too long ago. Really, why those deadlines are really being pushed back is the initial stages as we planned them were going to be a very intensive one-on-one stakeholder meeting, knock on doors, talk to people individually phase as we set up the early action plans to get replacement water out to impacted communities. That has to be completely rethought now. We need to get interactions with those community members, but it needs to be done in a way that keeps everybody safe, not just board staff, but also the community members that are in desperate need of that water, just the same now as they were before this crisis hit. So with that, I'll open the floor to see if anybody has any comments, questions about both our COVID-19 response and any matter that's discussed in the executive officer's report. And again, many thanks to Kieran, to board staff for still putting together the EO report, for still putting together this agenda, for keeping the train moving forward even in these very uncertain times.
Thank you, Patrick. Any comments or discussion from board members?
I have a question, Patrick. The very last part of what you were saying, where we're going to have to rethink how we do community outreach and things like that. Have we learned, or do we know of any organizations that are trying to find a way to do this and maybe kind of join them or see what strategies are out there so we don't have to struggle in kind of building something?
Absolutely. I mean, I know I mentioned it kind of last go around, but we, and by me, I mean we, the bigger state board family, are very lucky to have a new director of the Office of Public Participation, Gita's replacement, Adriana Ventura, who is really comes from the Community Water Center and is very well plugged in with the folks who know how to make this happen. And even on these uncertain times, they're working with the CV Salts group to come up with some guidance as to how we do it now. And so that's something that we're working with them on. All the stakeholders are kind of looking to all the resources available to figure out how do we do this now, and what that means, both for the folks that are connected and for the folks who are on the other side of the digital divide. Generally speaking, I will say that the feedback that we've gotten through some of the meetings with environmental justice stakeholders has been very positive. I mean, I think the digital divide is still there in a very, very big way. But that said, there's a lot more technology in the hands of environmental justice communities than there was 10 years ago. And whether that's the ability to use cell phones or the ability to kind of go to hotspots to communicate to these meetings. If you get that fairly rudimentary infrastructure in place, even if it means going to a board office, I think that those tools will actually make it a lot easier for some folks to participate. I know Carl kind of alluded to it. If you've got the connection, or if you can find a connection within your community to get piped into a board meeting, that makes a huge difference for somebody who works all day and can take 20 minutes aside to register a comment to the board, as opposed to driving 3, 4, 5, 6 hours to a board meeting to get their 3 minutes in front of the board. So again, the genie is out of the bottle. We're going to work pretty hard to make sure that the lessons that we learn here through these type of processes, we take to heart, and we try and make sure that they can facilitate greater participation in the future.
The reason that I asked is because even, in my job, I'm fairly sophisticated, but not all the way, right? I was intimidated by Zoom. I was just like, how much does it cost? Do I really, want to ask? My parents would never do this, right?
Yep.
But during this time, my parents have really gotten involved through like Facebook Live watch parties, and I never expected them to jump on board, but they have. And they've started participating in a church and a city they used to live in before, and things like that. So I think that where it's a little bit intimidating to have to show up to an official government building and fill out a blue card and things like that, if now we're moving towards being able to have videos or at least a discussion, and there's Facebook watch videos, people can participate in different ways, and maybe that sort of melts sort of the ice there a little bit, and then people recognize that we're a board, or at least an agency, that wants their participation, that invites them to join, and that they can join at whatever level they're at. If they've got Zoom, that's great. If they've got a cell phone where they do Facebook, then that works too. But I think that this is what I first thought was going to be a hindrance, the way you started your report. I realize now that it really can be an opportunity for new participants.
It's exciting. It's exciting times. I take all your words to heart. I think it's at least in my personal sense, there's something to be said about all of a sudden just about every man, woman, and child in the entire United States is on the downward part of that learning curve real quick. So everybody is having to learn something new, and so I think we've got a lot of folks who are learning it very quickly. I think you have folks like even Zoom itself developed a lot of patches in short order to make sure that we can do things like this. We can hold meetings like this securely and have these type of dialogues.
Well, Zoom came up with a waiting room, which really is a good measure to try to stop Zoom bombing. And I think you're absolutely right, Carmen. They say mother is
Necessity.
necessity is the mother of invention. Thank you very much. And certainly, the necessity forces people to try other strategies to be able to, in this case, communicate with folks. And I was always hesitant to get on Zoom, and I've Zoomed so much in the last few weeks, it's unbelievable. I just want to learn how I can put up nice pictures like Patrick does of himself so that you don't have to look at me in between here. Uh, the, but with that said, are there any other board members who have questions or comments?
I'll just add. Go ahead.
Go ahead, Denise.
I'll add. Oh, go ahead. Go ahead, Denise.
No, I was going to say I really do appreciate Carmen's comments. I was going to, of course, make a comment about outreach, but I think we're well on the way, as the discussion is indicated, and doing the reaching out, and all the technology is there. There are those opportunities, and with the new public participation officer or director, I think as also as Patrick said, we have the support that we need. We just need to continue the collaborative efforts and extending to make sure that everyone gets a voice at the table, and we'll do fine. But thank you, Carmen, for those comments. I do appreciate it.
Yeah, and I think Carmen indicated this. Apparently, this technology can be used on a smartphone. Is that correct, Patrick?
That is correct. That is correct. And I did want to correct myself. It's Adriana Renteria is the woman who is now heading the Office of Public Participation. I think I misspoke with her last name.
And just another note from me. Been seeing quite a bit published recently about the 100 years ago, the Spanish flu epidemic, and that stuck around for a long time. So if there's any parallel, hopefully there's not, but if there's parallel, and there probably will be, like you say, we'll be using this medium more and more. Any further board member comments?
I'd like to make one more comment before we conclude, and it is both a happy comment and for the board a bit of a sad comment, in that we are bidding adieu to both Brian Newman and Stuart Black in the upcoming weeks as they happily retire from the board after very, very long and lengthy state service where they've just been incredible. Brian was the program manager for the UST unit. He has been a tremendous resource and mentor to a huge amount of staff that has come through his unit. And Stuart Black, after a distinguished career at DTSC, has worked with the regional board for a number of years as the head of the cleanup program. The two of them are some of the most level-headed, calm, and pleasant people to work with, and back when I was an attorney, even work with on solving legal issues. Leave huge shoes to fill, and I know this medium is fantastic for a lot of things, but it's no substitute for raising a beer in person, and that's something that I certainly hope that we'll do once these stay-at-home orders are lifted and we can get back together again. That's top on the list is to have some type of gathering where we do honor the service that they've had to the board for both Brian and Stuart.
Well, let us, I agree with you, and our best wishes go with them as they enter another era, albeit bound at home to some degree. Very good. I emailed Patrick about a couple of questions I had on the EO report. One of the items I'd like to read you his answer on, and it pertains to Delta Mercury. And he says, we just assigned a new program lead. Her name is Lauren Smitherman. And we'll get a meeting together this summer for briefing, he says. But he says it might be worth to get a board subgroup together for Mercury issues. And in the past, we've talked about maybe a subgroup for the Delta. I don't know if we ever established that or not. But I would ask board members to think about that. We can talk about it at the June meeting, but I do think we need to talk about it and ask for volunteers. It would be this whole Mercury issue, the Mercury cleanup issue, the impact on disadvantaged communities, we go on and on and on and on, and we get information briefings from time to time, but uh, right with the other major issues we have, it's one of the very big issues we have, and it's very difficult to get our arms around it. In fact, we can't really get our arms around it because we don't have good answers for the mercury that's in the sediment on how to keep that from getting moved into the water stream as methyl mercury. There's just we go on and on. So we need a subcommittee, I think, to work with Patrick and staff to be able to um, address the issues as they come down the road. Anything else? Corinne, are there any interested persons who submitted an email?
No, Dr. Longley.
And there is no other interested persons with cards?
No.
Okay, thank you very much. We'll move on to item 6, the uncontested calendar. This is a time and place for a public hearing to consider uncontested items 9 through 12. And I take it from what you said, Corinne, that there's no emails on this. Is that correct?
That's correct, Dr. Longley. No emails, no cards.
Thank you very much. Adam, are there any late revisions?
No late revisions, Dr. Longley.
Very good. We'll close the hearing. I ask for a motion.
So, Dr. Longley, I would make the motion to approve the consent agenda as presented.
Thank you. Do I have a second?
I'll second that.
Carmen's moved. Raji has seconded. Call the roll, please.
Board Member Bradford.
Yes.
Board Member Brar.
Yes.
Board Member Kadara.
Yes.
Board Member Ramirez.
Yes.
Chair Longley.
Yes.
Dr. Longley, can I make a comment on that same item?
Sure.
I just wanted to say that in the past, when the city of Merced had come up for whatever it had been on uncontested issues, I used to recuse myself because about 5 years ago I had acted as a hearing officer for them. I haven't done that in about 5 years. So just if anybody's keeping track that I recused myself a long time ago, I did. But since then, I don't have a financial relationship or any other kind of relationship with the city of Merced anymore. And therefore, there was no conflict, and I went ahead and voted on the uncontested item.
Thank you for that, Carmen, and the motion does carry. We'll move on to agenda item 7, Oilfield Food Safety Expert Panel Project Update. At this time, the board will hear an update on the Oilfield Food Safety Expert Panel Project. This is an information item only, and no action will be taken, although the board may ask questions and provide direction to staff. After the staff presentation, interested persons will be allowed 3 minutes each to address the board. As a reminder, if you intend to present or comment on any of the items in this hearing, or think you might be interested in commenting, you should already be in the Zoom meeting room using the meeting ID provided on the board's website and the password you received from our staff. If you've not already received a password, you can email us now at agenda5, that's the word agenda, AGENDA 5, the number 5, at waterboards.ca.gov, and it's on your screen now. Include speaker comment in the subject line so that we can follow up with you. For those in the Zoom meeting, you will be on mute and your camera turned off until it is your turn to speak. Our meeting host, Gene Coughlin from our IT team, will then unmute you and ask you to turn on your camera if you have one. When you finish speaking and the board members have completed asking questions, you'll be placed on mute and your camera turned off. We'll now hear the staff presentation.
Thank you, Dr. Longley. I'm going to turn it over to Josh Mahoney with our oil fields program, and he will be joined by Dr. William Stringfellow of Berkeley National Laboratory, who is acting as a consultant to the board as we work through these difficult issues involving both food safety and oil field produced water. I also, as we kind of show that on the screen, I also want to give my thanks to Holly Martin, who's our web guru at the regional board, making sure that we have all the information up on the website in a format that's easy to understand and that can be usable for anybody who wants to join up and comment on board items. With that, I'll turn it over to Josh.
Thank you, Patrick. Just wanted to confirm that everyone can hear me. Can everyone hear me?
You're in good shape.
Yep. Okay. All right. Now we can see the screen. Okay. Perfect. Good afternoon, Chair Longley and members of the board. My name is Josh Mahoney, and I'm a water resource control engineer with your Fresno office. Today's presentation will be given by me and Dr. William Stringfellow, Science Advisor to the Central Valley Water Board. This information item is intended to provide the board with an update of the food safety project. No action is being taken by the board for this item. I will start my presentation with an introduction of the reuse of produced water, followed by background information of the food safety project. Then I will go over the food safety meetings and provide an update of the food safety task and the white paper. Lastly, I will talk about next steps for the food safety project. The food safety project consists of a comprehensive review related to the reuse of produced water for irrigation of crops for human consumption. Produced water is a byproduct of oil production. Production fluid pumped from a petroleum well normally consists of approximately 10% oil and 90% oil-filled produced water or produced water. The reuse of this produced water for irrigation has occurred in Kern County for over 30 years. The discharge and reuse of produced water is regulated by the Central Valley Water Board under waste discharge requirements. The produced water reused for irrigation is from specific oil fields located along the east side of Kern County. Unlike most oil-filled produced water, which is saline, this produced water is of good quality with respect to salts, having an average value of produced water and blended produced water of 635 micromoles per centimeter for electrical conductivity, 95 milligrams per liter for chloride, and 0.7 milligrams per liter for boron. The Central Valley Water Board currently regulates 5 facilities that reuse produced water for irrigation. 4 of the 5 facilities currently blend produced water. 4 of the 5 facilities currently blend produced water with traditional sources of irrigation water prior to reuse. Due to the exceptionally low salinity of produced water at the 5th facility, the WDRs do not require the produced water to be blended prior to reuse. There are approximately 94,000 acres of cropland in Kern County that are permitted to reuse produced water for irrigation. Crops irrigated with produced water are listed on this slide and arranged in order based on the acreage of land used to grow each crop type. The largest acreage is attributed to citrus, almonds, grapes, and pistachios. Crops with the least amount of acreage include apples, tomatoes, cherries, and root crops, which include garlic, carrots, and potatoes. The aerial image on the screen highlights the land currently under WDRs authorizing irrigation with produced water. As shown in the map, this land is north of Bakersfield and south and east of Delano. The red is North Kern Water Storage District, the orange is Coelho Water District, and the blue is Kern-Tulare Water District. The green shaded area is the Sherwood Project, which is anticipated to start reusing produced water for irrigation this year. The food safety project started in 2015 out of an abundance of caution as water board staff became aware of growing public concern related to the reuse of produced water for irrigation of crops for human consumption. Since food safety is not within the area of expertise of water board staff convened a panel of experts in various fields to address the public's concern related to human health and crop safety. Water board staff reached out to other public, state, and federal agencies, private organizations, and research institutions to get experts in the field of toxicology, risk assessment, agriculture, public health, and wildlife. Currently, the food safety expert panel consists of 9 members that are volunteering their time. Also, Water Board staff recruited a science advisor for assistance with food safety related matters. Dr. William Stringfellow is an emeritus professor at the School of Engineering and Computer Science at the University of Pacific in Stockton, California, a research engineer in the Energy Geosciences Department at Berkeley National Laboratory, has over 35 years experience in wastewater treatment and management, and was one of the lead scientists on the SB4 scientific study evaluating hydraulic fracturing in California. Dr. Stringfellow was selected as the science advisor based on his education and experience. Water Board staff developed a Memorandum of Understanding, or MOU, which is an agreement between the Central Valley Water Board and the producers and distributors of produced water, also known as dischargers. The MOU outlines the work to be completed under the Food Safety Project. In general, the MOU states that the work will be completed by a third-party consultant, which has been awarded to GSI Environmental Inc., or GSI. Work completed by GSI under the Food Safety Project will subsequently be reviewed by the panel and the science advisor. The work completed by GSI has and will continue to be funded by the dischargers. Also, the work completed under the Food Safety Project by GSI has and will continue to be overseen and managed by Water Board staff. This MOU creates a separation between the work completed under the Food Safety Project and the dischargers funding the project. The MOU also ensures that the technical work and findings of the Food Safety Project are not influenced by the dischargers funding the project. Water Board staff has organized and hosted 15 public meetings for the Food Safety Project. Public meetings are open to walk-ins, webcasted, and recorded and posted to the Food Safety page. The Food Safety page is on the Central Valley Water Board's website under the Oil Field Program. The Food Safety meetings cover a wide range of topics, which commonly include updates of crop sampling events and results, presentations and updates of the task work and the white paper, presentations by other researchers such as Dr. Gary Bonuelos, plant nutritionist with the United States Department of Agriculture, and the research group commonly referred to as the Duke Study, which consists of the following individuals: Dr. Avner Van Gosh with Duke University, Dr. Laura Feinstein with Pacific Institute, and Ms. Jenny Redmond with RTI International. The meetings are also open to public comments, which can be provided in person during the meeting or submitted via email. In addition, Water Board staff also prepares meeting summaries for public meetings. The meeting summaries, along with the recording of the meetings, are available on the Food Safety page. Water Board staff has organized these meetings to keep the public up to date with the Food Safety Project and will continue to post materials on the Food Safety page to maintain transparency throughout this project. Also, Water Board staff has organized numerous working meetings and conference calls with the panel to get additional feedback and input for specific food safety related items. The work under the Food Safety Project is broken down into 3 tasks. Task 1 is a preliminary hazard assessment to identify a list of chemicals of interest. Task 2 is a comprehensive literature review of the chemicals of interest identified in Task 1. And Task 3 is the collection and analysis of crop samples to determine if there's a difference between crops irrigated with produced water versus traditional sources. At this time, I will turn the presentation over to Dr. William Stringfellow to talk about the work related to the food safety tasks.
Thank you very much, Josh. As Josh discussed, the tasks are contracted out to GSI, and they're broken down into these task reports that are being completed within the next few months, we hope. The first task was to try to identify chemicals of interest, which is to narrow down the scope of the work so that we're focused in on what we thought was important in terms of chemicals. There was an initial survey that identified 399 chemicals. There were naturally occurring chemicals, which are chemicals that are found in oil, as you might expect, things like toluene, which are components of gasoline that are found in crude oil. And then we also looked at the oil field additives, which are synthetic or anthropogenic compounds that are added during part of the extraction process, either for things like corrosion control or for help separate oil and water. And these oil field additives were a complete list that was provided to the regional board by the oil companies that are providing produced water for irrigated agriculture, and it's a complete disclosure list. So we had every chemical that they were using on their field, whether it was in a small or large amount, was included on that list. From those two combined lists of the 399 chemicals list, there was the actual chemicals of interest that we're interested in looking at further. We identified 143 compounds. These compounds were selected predominantly on chronic oil toxicity criteria. So we looked at chronic oil toxicity primarily because we're concerned about potential consumption in food. So that was the number one criteria. So those, from that list of almost 400 chemicals, we've narrowed it down to 143 compounds that we are giving much more complete scrutiny. Next slide, please. So this work is essentially completed. The report's been written. It's been reviewed by the panel. They received comments from the panel and myself as the science advisor and from board staff. The GSI consultant incorporated the comments, and we have now distributed what I believe is the final report for public review. And so that if there are comments on that, now would be the time to make any sort of comments on those, on that completed report. It's publicly available on the food safety page. Next slide, please. The task 2 is a larger task that involves taking a look at those chemicals that are on the chemical of interest list, the 143 chemicals. The idea is that we take a look, an in-depth dive into those 143 chemicals. We're using government available data. There's a lot of information on toxicology of chemicals and the environmental state of chemicals that are put through programs like the Food and Agricultural Association, FDA, and also groups like NIST that make measurements on these compounds and have peer-reviewed technical criteria for how toxic or not toxic the compounds are. There's also information on how biodegradable the compounds or environmental state. We use those as a first stop, and then also looked at other literature review. They looked in more in depth, especially in compounds that we're particularly interested in. The major next step after the toxicity at this point was to look at environmental fate and transport, start to look at things like potential degradation and reaction projects, and particularly also taking a look at any kind of uptake into plants, because what we're really most important in is whether the compound in the water can go through the soil and then be taken up into a plant and potentially be incorporated into a crop food. Just in bottom line summary on that is that there's no evidence that there's any kind of higher plant uptake rates for these chemicals of interest. We've not seen any red flags in that criteria. Next slide, please. The task 2 report has the first draft's been written. It's been reviewed by the panel. Both the panel and myself reviewed it along with the staff. And right now it's going through some structural revisions just to make it easier reading. And we haven't distributed for public review yet, but it will be once the next, I believe probably, I shouldn't commit, but my understanding is the next draft comes out, that should be available at that point. But it's going to go through the panel again. They want to look at it again. And that's where we're at on that report. Next slide, please. The task 3 report, even though it's number 3, it was the first thing we got started on, which is the crop sampling program. The objective of the crop sampling program was to compare crops that were irrigated with produced water, which we are referred to as the treated crops, versus comparable fields that were irrigated with waters other than produced water. So this program, in terms of the sampling, has been completed. Crops were collected in 3 years from 2017 to 2019. We collected samples from the 13 crop types, as were discussed by Josh in a couple of slides previously. The bottom line result on this project is that there's no significant increase in health hazards associated with consuming treated samples over control samples. If you go to the next slide. So that task 3 report, which contains again the crop sampling data, it's been reviewed by the panel. It's received comments from the panel, the staff, and the science advisor, and myself. They're being incorporated and being discussed. And a draft report, I believe, was distributed to the public for review, and we're on the final steps to getting the final report out the door. Next slide. Okay, I think it's back to Josh, and at the end of this presentation, I'll still be here, and anybody would like to ask me questions or follow up, as you wish. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Stringfellow. Currently, Water Board staff is preparing a white paper for the food safety project. Since the panel consists of volunteers, Water Board staff is preparing this white paper on their behalf. The white paper will be a culmination of the work completed throughout the food safety project, which will include the work and findings for tasks 1, 2, and 3. Also, the white paper will include panel recommendations. The panel is currently developing these recommendations, which are anticipated to pertain to the following categories: the produced water reuse program, management of potential hazards from additives, and studies or actions to close identified data gaps. Since the recommendations have not been approved by the panel, specific details are not available at this time. Once the panel has approved the panel recommendations, the document will be made available to the public for review. Water Board staff continues to work with the science advisor and panel in the development of the white paper. As part of this process, various draft versions of the report have been made available for comments as sections are completed. Also, in an effort to maintain transparency, Water Board staff has continued to make draft versions of the white paper available to the public for review. Versions are usually posted after significant updates have been pre-reviewed by the panel. To date, there are 3 draft versions of the white paper available on the food safety page. These versions are dated 28 June 2017, 27 August 2019, and 12 November 2019. Water Board staff is waiting for the task 2 and 3 reports to be complete before posting another version of the white paper to the food safety page for public review. Next steps for the food safety project include some of the following. For the food safety tasks, Water Board staff will continue to work with GSI to finalize the task 2 and 3 reports. When complete and reviewed by the panel and science advisor, these reports will be posted to the food safety page for public review. For the white paper, Water Board staff will continue to incorporate comments and edits by the panel and science advisor. After the white paper has been approved by the panel, Water Board staff will distribute a draft public white paper for a public comment period. Water Board staff anticipates the following public meetings: one additional public food safety meeting to present the final panel recommendations and prepare a food safety resolution for consideration by the board during a future board meeting. As a note, due to the COVID-19 emergency, Water Board staff does not have an anticipated date for these meetings. The goal of meetings is to maximize public participation, which may result in either a webcasted meeting or an open meeting at an unknown future date. If anyone is interested in additional information related to the food safety project, please visit the food safety page at the link shown at the top of the screen. Also, if there are any questions related to food safety, emails can be sent to the email address provided on the bottom of the screen. This concludes my presentation, and I'll open it up to any questions from the board.
Josh, Carl Longley, appreciate the briefing by you and by Dr. Stringfellow. I, for one, would like to see us, if it can't be heard, if the white paper and other documents cannot be presented at the June meeting, then I would urge us maybe to go to a separate standalone meeting. That would also allow us to notice this meeting separately and may catch attention of more people. This is a very, very important document, or set of documents, I should add. This has been great work done by a very talented group of people. But I say that because apparently this is the first time that anything of this nature has been done. And I'm finding out that there has been at most limited use of produced water for irrigation elsewhere in the United States. However, it's being looked at now as a very significant possible source of water for future needs, particularly in arid areas. An example, New Mexico has oil fields in the San Juan Basin, but more specifically in a basin in the southeastern part of New Mexico. New Mexico is one of the poorest states in the Union, and this gush of oil, if you will, that they're coming across is improving their finances tremendously. Obviously, there's a lot of politics around oil and oil safety and the use of oil. And it's of interest, possibly, that they are now looking to use produced water for agriculture, particularly in the southeastern part of New Mexico. To that end, they have contracted with New Mexico State University, which is part of the Lawrence Berkeley NOWI project, to come up with recommendations. And they are looking towards the work coming out of this effort as to give them some direction. Now, I should add with that, it was early in the meeting, in this presentation, it was stated that this oil is of, the produced water is of particularly high water quality, and it is because of the peculiar geology and formation of the oil here. That has been discussed in previous board meetings by Clay Rogers, and most produced water has much higher TDS, but still this is being looked at, and I think the work that you're doing, your group is doing, is going to play a large role elsewhere in the United States.
Dr. Longley?
Yes.
Yeah, I was curious. I remember when the start of the Food Safety Committee got started, there were lots of residents in the area having concerns about the produced water. And then with the results of the findings and where we are with the report, what has been the response from the public as a result of some of the findings? I'm just curious.
Clay, could you answer that?
Yeah, I can. This is Clay Rogers, Assistant Executive Officer in the Fresno office. And actually, Ms. Kadara, the reception of this work by the community has been very positive. We worked diligently with stakeholders from all areas, environmental groups that have been opposed to the use of this water. And for the most part, they've been very receptive of the work that we've completed. What they've wanted to see is that an effort of this type has been taken and that decisions are made based upon the facts and the science behind them, and not based on assumptions. So I think that's been positive. We're still working through this. We may get more comments after the white paper comes out, and we're dealing with that in the public, but we hope to have that in front of the board this summer.
Very good. Thank you. Go ahead.
No, I was saying
Josh,
thank
yours.
you.
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, I was just saying thank you to Clay. I'm glad to hear the response, and the public feedback has been positive. Initially there were some real issues there, and nobody believed that there would be anything that would come of this other than it was bad water. So it's good that we've gotten through this part of the process, and that it's not, people are understanding and appreciating the science. So it's good, and I'm glad to hear it.
Thank you. Thank you, Denise. Any further comments, questions?
Dr. Longley?
Yes.
So I might be one of the people that Denise remembers because, this has been a hard one for me because I am the person that falls into I want to follow the science, but my emotion or my beliefs doesn't let me follow it kind of as easily as it does on other issues. And that's just a preconceived notion, right? It's not based on science, it's just based on whatever's in my head. So I appreciate the science, and I'm open to it, and I feel like I'm starting to come along. I guess I have two questions, and they still have this, kind of that doubt sort of tone to them. But my first question is, do we feel like, I think that the people that we're using are highly qualified, right? And I feel comfortable with that. The science that we're using and that the science that we have access to, are we using what we consider to be the best or highest science available to conduct these studies and measure the results?
I'll let Dr. Stringfellow answer that, or Clay.
Yeah, I was just going to add, this is Clay Rogers again. I was just going to add that I think we have a number of the national experts involved in this. I think the work that the folks from Duke University are doing also supports some of the conclusions, and I'll let Dr. Stringfellow go in on that as one of probably the leading experts in the United States on this issue.
Well, I think to answer your question directly, I think we're doing good science. We're doing it properly. We're applying the best techniques and methods that we have available to us now. The bottom line question in the end for us is turning into is, when is water just water? And when is it a question of where, just because it came from an oil field, if it's good, high quality water, then it's good, high quality water. And that's a lot of where the work is sort of going to, in my opinion. And I think that you represent a lot of people in the public, and part of the objective of the study is to make sure that you're comfortable with the process and with the practice, and that we've set up the right guardrails so that as the practice goes forward, that everybody is assured that the appropriate regulatory structure and the appropriate kind of monitoring and controls are in place.
Thank you. Mark, did you have a question or comment?
Well, just, I guess, reflecting on what Carmen just mentioned, we did have a hearing, I don't know, a couple of meetings ago when we approved a permit for the reuse of this water on the east side of Kern. And there were some advocates, some environmental advocates there who I think they just dispute the science based on a similar fear, and whether I think it's critical that it is all peer reviewed and it goes through the system properly so that people's concerns can be put to rest at some level. At some level, they never will be. but as long as the science is there, I guess I always go back to that. The facts matter. So I think there'll be a contingent out there that will never be convinced no matter what.
I think you're right on that. The other part of that is that there are folks that are wanting us to move off of oil quickly because of the air pollution issues,
Right.
and they see the further use of oil as and the produced water that comes with it as just keeping this thing going. In a
Right.
sense, I have to agree with them, but
Yeah.
our bit is water quality, and that's what we have to focus on here.
Mhm.
The thing that I think will help a lot is when the recommendations come out. And unlike the task reports, which some of them tend to be pretty heavy science and pretty heavy reading, the recommendations won't be such as lengthy a document. And I think when you see those recommendations, and we can't talk about them now because it hasn't been released yet, but I think when you see those recommendations, we need to continue this discussion, and I think that it'll be a somewhat different discussion at that point. Anything else?
May I have one small comment?
Sure.
Ms. Ramirez, also, I just want to assure you, I was incredibly skeptical of the practice when I entered this, when I was recruited to become involved in this program. And I managed to become convinced that it's perfectly safe.
Good. Well, I appreciate that because I lost you there for part of the time. I caught the last part. And the last part is kind of what my last question was, which was, doing what you do and in your heart of hearts, is there any reservation that we're moving too fast, that science doesn't really support where we're going? But I think you just answered that before I asked. So thank you.
The two issues really. One is, are there contaminants that get into the fruit itself that make the fruit dangerous to use? I say fruit, I'm talking about potatoes or carrots or whatever produce there may be. And the other question is, if this water is going to be used for drinking water, can that be made safe? And our focus here is on the food. I think a presentation given by Gary, oh my gosh, I can't pull his last name down, a gentleman from ARS, Agricultural Research Services, Gary Banuelos, yeah, Dr. Banuelos, pointed out that uptake probably would not occur, significant uptake would not occur with the organic compounds. It's the inorganic compounds we have to worry about. And so then we get into the bit, if you're going to use this for drinking water, and that's not a proposal here, but if you're going to use this for drinking water, that's being looked at by others elsewhere, then that's a different issue, and our treatment process is able to clean it up so it can be used for drinking water. But that's not really what we're considering here. This is food safety. And it's a different mechanism that takes place insofar as the uptake of any contaminants by the food crops themselves. Any other comment? Okay, Corinne, do we have a card?
Yes, Dr. Longley. David and Sola Behir from the Coelho Water District is here in case you or Clay have any questions.
Okay. I don't have any questions for David, but do any members of the board have a question? Seeing none, then we'll move on. And unless I've missed something, I think we've pretty well covered the topic on this item. It's an information item, so there's no further action required. Thanks a lot for a very good presentation. We will look forward to you returning soon with some products for us to act on. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
That we will move to agenda item 8, unless the executive officer tells me I need to do something else.
I think you're in good shape. My thanks also go out to Dr. Stringfellow and to Josh Mahoney and the rest of Dale Harvey's group for staying on top of this. It's really tough to answer these type of questions when it's beyond our agency's expertise. The oil field unit that Clay manages really hit it out of the park with the consortium of folks that they got together to weigh in on this. I would say that, you know, including voices, a diverse amount of voices on the panel has really paid dividends. It really made the panel stronger, and I think it really made the result all that more trustworthy by members of the public.
It has created a lot more discussion, which is good. They've looked at this thing upside down, around and about, on every angle, and so I think that is a real payoff here. Thank you very much. We'll now move on to agenda item 8, selection of vice chair. At this time, we move to the selection of vice chair for the Central Valley Water Board. During the February board meeting, the board selected a chair and postponed the selection of vice chair to this meeting to ensure that all board members can participate. We'll begin this item with comments by interested persons. We have no cards, am I correct?
No cards, Dr. Longley.
Thank you very much, because I was going to limit them to 3 minutes each. Okay. Is there any discussion or nomination at this point? It's up to you. It's up to you board members to carry the discussion on this and to nominate.
Dr. Longley, I have a question for Board Member Ramirez. Carmen, last time at the meeting, you weren't there, and I wanted to make sure we had your input to see if you were interested or not in the position. I think we waited on this because you weren't available. Can't you hear me?
We have delays as people click on and off.
Okay.
Carmen?
Yeah, I'm not seeing on there right now.
She apparently just has the camera, so let's give it just 1 second.
Yeah.
Someone might try to call her and see if she's having some problems.
Yeah, she has dropped in and out here. She's joining now.
Good.
We're a bit like air traffic controllers.
Hi, can everybody hear me? I'm back.
There. Did you hear the question from Raji?
Oh, she was back.
She was back.
Can you hear me?
We can hear you now. Did you hear the question from Raji?
No.
Raji, would you mind repeating that? Okay.
No problem. So Carmen, at the last board meeting, you weren't there, and I know you expressed interest before in being a vice chair, because you are the vice chair. And I just wanted to see if you're still interested or not.
I am still interested. I got, I think, nice insight from being the vice chair. I enjoy it. I've learned a lot. So certainly if somebody else is interested, I can appreciate that it's a nice position to be in. So yes, I'm interested, but I also recognize the importance of it. So I would consider other people who might be interested as well.
Well, okay. Any other board members wishing to speak and make a nomination if possible?
Well, Carmen, I guess at the last meeting, one of the topics we discussed is being very active and supporting Carl. And I raised my hand tentatively because I wasn't sure what your intentions were. And I'm in Sacramento, which makes life a lot easier for me to do stuff like that if necessary. Given how the coronavirus is affecting everybody's lives, I don't know that in-person meetings are going to be as critical, moving forward. So I'm happy to stay where I'm at and have you continue in that role. And I think, using these new technologies that we have available might make it a lot easier than it has been for you living down the valley.
Well, I appreciate that, and like I said, it's a really nice and insightful position to be vice chair. So I am certainly grateful to you if you're willing to allow me to stay on. Having said that, I think that there is value to having people close to Sacramento. So I think that the board has two good candidates to consider.
Very good.
Maybe more. I don't know if anybody else wants to.
Do I hear a nomination?
I think things are running pretty smoothly.
Raji, you're muted.
Well, I'm sorry. Last time, Carmen, I held out for you because you weren't there. So I think I'm just going to get this going, and I'd like to nominate you for vice chair, and I'll just go with that.
Do I have a second?
I'll second that.
Thank you. Any further nominations? We're going to declare the nominations closed unless I hear someone speak up. The nominations are closed. So we have one nominee. Call the roll.
Board Member Brar.
Yes.
Board Member Ramirez.
Yes.
Board Member Kadara. Board Member Bradford.
Yes.
Chair Longley.
Yes.
Looks like that's unanimous.
Unanimous vote. Thank you, and congratulations, Carmen. And next time, if you go to Italy, we expect you to host the meeting from Italy.
Well, next time I will. I appreciate it. And Raji, I appreciate you sort of going to bat for me at the last meeting. I didn't realize you had done that, but my hesitation with just sort of full-throatedly asking to be considered was that I anticipated missing the April meeting, which I knew would be an important meeting in Bakersfield. Given that I'm not traveling and I am available to participate in meetings, I'm glad that I got kind of a second chance. So I will, do my best to represent the board as best I can. So thank you, Mark, and thank you, Raji, and everybody else who supported me.
Well, thank you. And with that, Patrick, we have no further business, and unless you want to talk about something that's on the agenda, we will adjourn this meeting.
My recommendation is that we adjourn to the next board meeting.
Very good. We'll adjourn until the next board meeting. Thank you. Thank you all very much.
And the date of that next board meeting?
June 4th and 5th.
June 4th and 5th. Okay.
Probably right where you are right now.